Have you ever walked away from a conversation, replaying it in your head, wondering what you missed? Not what they said, but what they meant. You felt it. Something was off. A tone, a pause, a look. But you couldn't name it, so you ignored it. And later, you realized you were right. That quiet frustration, that feeling of always being 2 steps behind socially, that's where this begins. Because the truth is, people are never as confusing as they seem. We just haven't been taught how to read them. And when you don't know how to read people, life feels unpredictable. You misjudge intentions. You trust the wrong ones. You get blindsided by behavior you didn't see coming. And slowly, you start believing something is wrong with you. You tell yourself, I'm bad with people. I overthink everything. I can't tell what people really feel. But here's the part nobody tells you. You're not bad with people. You're just untrained. Because people are talking all the time, not with words, with their body, their face, their tone, their habits, their choices. They are leaking clues every second. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Be honest for a second. Does this feel familiar? That moment when someone says, I'm fine, but you know they're not. You feel it in your gut, but you don't know why. So you doubt yourself. You override your intuition. And that's where things start going wrong. But this is where things change. Because the problem isn't that people are complicated. The problem is you've been trying to understand them from the outside, instead of from the inside. Wait till you hear this. Every single behavior you've ever seen from anyone, anger, silence, arrogance, insecurity, confidence, jealousy, kindness, comes from one hidden place. Motivation. Not surface behavior, not personality, motivation. And once you understand what drives a person underneath, you can predict what they'll do next with scary accuracy. Think about someone you know who gets defensive easily. They argue, they explain, they justify, they snap. You think they're difficult, but what if they're terrified of failing? What if their entire personality is built around protecting themselves from feeling inadequate? Suddenly, they're not annoying, they're afraid, and you respond completely differently. Is this you, or just me? Because the moment you start seeing people this way, you stop taking things personally, you stop reacting emotionally, you start responding strategically, and life feels lighter. Now here's the part that gets real. Humans are ruled by 2 forces: chasing pleasure, avoiding pain, and avoiding pain wins almost every time. That's why people procrastinate, why they lie, why they stay in bad relationships, why they lash out. They're not chasing happiness, they're running from discomfort. And when you see that, you stop asking, why are they like this? And start asking, what pain are they trying to avoid? That one question changes how you see everyone, even yourself, because suddenly you realize, half the things you do are just pain avoidance too. So why do we keep doing this even when we know better? Because most of us never learned how to see the invisible drivers behind behavior. But that's just the beginning. Because people don't only leak clues through actions, they leak them through their body. And this next part changes everything. You've been told body language is things like crossed arms, eye contact, posture. That's kindergarten level. Real body language is micro-expressions. Tiny flashes of emotion on the face that last less than a second. Too fast to fake, too fast to control. A flicker of anger, a hint of fear, a micro-smile that disappears. And once you know what to look for, you start seeing what people feel before they say a word. Think about that. You start sensing discomfort before the conversation turns awkward. You see insecurity before they try to overcompensate. You notice dishonesty before the story falls apart. And here's the wild part. You've seen these signs your whole life. You just didn't know they meant something. If this makes sense, say something. Because once this clicks, social situations stop feeling chaotic. They start feeling readable, predictable, almost like a game where you finally know the rules. And that's when a strange thing happens. You stop feeling anxious around people. Because uncertainty disappears. You're not guessing anymore. You're observing. And observing gives you control. And once you start observing, you notice something else. One gesture means nothing, but a cluster of gestures, that's the truth screaming quietly. Crossed arms alone could be cold. Averted eyes alone could be shy. Tight lips alone could be thinking. But crossed arms, averted eyes, and tight lips together? Discomfort, defensiveness, closed off. And suddenly you realize why you've misread people for years. You were judging single signals instead of patterns. This is where it gets real. Because the human brain is primitive when it comes to emotion. When someone feels stressed, threatened, or anxious, their body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And they start doing something fascinating. Self-soothing, touching the neck, rubbing the hands, fidgeting, adjusting clothes, scratching the face. These aren't random habits. They are the body trying to calm itself down. Which means, whenever you see someone doing this, you're watching their stress in real time, before they admit it, before they even know it. Think about how powerful that is in a conversation. You ask a simple question. They start touching their neck. You know you hit something sensitive. No guessing, no overthinking, just observation. Which one are you right now? Guessing or observing? And here's where it gets even more interesting. Mirroring. When someone subtly copies your posture, your tone, your rhythm, that's not coincidence. That's rapport. That's the subconscious saying, I feel safe with you. So if you want someone to open up, you don't force it. You create comfort and watch for mirroring, because when they mirror you, you've already won half the conversation. But here's the twist nobody talks about. You can't read people unless you know their baseline, what's normal for them, because some people fidget all the time. Some avoid eye contact naturally. Some speak fast when relaxed. So you don't watch for what they do, you watch for what changes. Deviation from baseline is where truth lives, and that's when something incredible happens. You stop trying to figure people out from what they say. You start understanding them from what changes when they speak. Now pause for a second. Have you ever felt like someone was lying, but you couldn't prove it? You felt crazy for thinking it. You doubted yourself. But later, you were right. That wasn't intuition. That was your brain picking up signals you didn't consciously understand. And this next part changes everything. Lie detection is not about catching nervousness, because honest people get nervous too. Real detection comes from increasing cognitive load, meaning liars have to work harder to maintain their story. So instead of asking yes/no questions, you ask them to explain. Then watch what happens. Their story gets vague. Details change. Emotions don't match the words. They become stiff, careful, unnatural, because they're thinking too much. Truth flows. Lies calculate. Be honest. Does this feel familiar? That stiff, unnatural vibe you felt from someone before? That's cognitive load. And once you know this, you don't accuse. You just ask better questions and let their own behavior reveal the answer. But here's where things shift from observing behavior to predicting it. Personality patterns, not labels, patterns. Some people need structure to feel safe. Some need attention to feel valued. Some need harmony to feel calm. Some need logic to feel convinced. And once you identify what someone needs emotionally, you stop arguing with them. You start speaking their language. You don't use logic on someone driven by emotion. You don't use emotion on someone driven by logic. And suddenly, they feel understood. And when people feel understood, they open up without resistance. Most people won't admit this part.
We don't struggle with people because they're difficult. We struggle because we're speaking the wrong emotional language to them. And the moment you adjust, conversations that used to feel tense feel smooth. Now here's the part nobody expects. As you get better at reading others, you start reading yourself. You start noticing your own defense mechanisms, your own stress signals, your own motivations, and you realize you weren't confused about people. You were disconnected from patterns. But this is where things really change, because observation turns into intuition, and intuition turns into confidence, and confidence changes how you walk into every room.
And that confidence? It's quiet, not loud, not flashy. Just calm certainty. Because now social situations don't feel like chaos. They feel readable, predictable, almost like slow motion. You walk into a room and within seconds you can feel who's comfortable, who's anxious, who's trying too hard, who's holding back. You don't know why yet, but you see the signs. And this is where something powerful happens. Thin slicing. The ability to make accurate judgments from tiny pieces of information. First impressions that usually turn out to be right. But here's the catch. Most people ignore their first impression because they think it's judging. So they override it with logic, and later regret it. Why do we keep doing this even when we know better? Because we've been taught not to trust our observations. But observation is not judgment, it's data. And when you treat it like data, not emotion, it becomes incredibly reliable. You start noticing the words people choose, pronouns, tone, energy. Someone who constantly says they instead of we feels disconnected. Someone who uses dramatic words often may be emotionally reactive. Someone who speaks in very precise language may value control and clarity. And then you notice something else. Their stuff, their clothes, their workspace, their car, their phone background. All extensions of identity. People broadcast who they are through what they surround themselves with. And once you start seeing that, you can walk into someone's house and understand them before they say a word. But this is where it gets interesting. Online behavior, social media, where people think they're curating a fake version of themselves. But actually, they reveal their real one, what they share, what they like, what they comment on. That's their inner world leaking out, and you start realizing, people are constantly telling you who they are. We just weren't trained to listen. Which one are you right now? Seeing this for the first time, or remembering moments when you noticed it before? Now here's the part that feels almost unfair. Strategic questions. Instead of asking direct questions that make people defensive, you ask indirect ones, hypotheticals. What would you do if? How do you feel about people who? And suddenly they reveal their values without realizing it. Because hypotheticals feel safe, and safety makes honesty flow. You're not interrogating, you're exploring, and people open up effortlessly. This is where your relationships start changing. Because you stop reacting to what people do. You start understanding why they do it. And when you understand why, you stop taking things personally. That defensive coworker, afraid of failure. That overly confident friend, seeking validation. That distant partner, protecting old wounds. And this next realization hits hard. People are not difficult. People are predictable. We just didn't know the code. Be honest, does this feel familiar? That moment when you misunderstood someone for years and later realized you had it completely wrong? Now imagine never doing that again. And here's where it turns inward. Because the more you read people, the more people feel seen around you. And when people feel seen, they trust you. They open up. They respect you. Not because you're louder, but because you understand. You become the person others feel safe around. And you didn't change who you are. You just learned how to observe. And suddenly, you're no longer socially anxious. You're socially aware. And awareness feels like control. But this is where things change one last time. Because you stop trying to win conversations and start trying to understand them. And ironically, that's when you start winning.
And this is where it all clicks. You realize you were never bad with people. You were just trying to navigate a language you were never taught. A language made of posture, tone, micro-expressions, word choice, motivation, patterns. And now, you're fluent. But the biggest shift isn't what you see in others, it's what you see in yourself. Because once you understand how transparent people are, you realize how transparent you've always been too. Your crossed arms, your forced smile, your defensive tone, your silence when you felt judged, your over-explaining when you felt insecure. You weren't mysterious. You were readable, just like everyone else. And instead of feeling exposed, you feel empowered. Because now you can choose what you project. You can soften your posture when you want someone to feel safe. You can slow your tone when someone feels anxious. You can maintain eye contact when you want to show confidence. You're no longer reacting unconsciously. You're communicating intentionally. And this next part changes everything. You stop fearing social situations. You start studying them. A party becomes a lab. A meeting becomes a puzzle. A conversation becomes a game of patterns, and suddenly, you're calm, because you understand the rules. If this makes sense, say something. Not out loud, just to yourself. Because this is the moment you realize people have been telling you exactly who they are your whole life. You just didn't know how to read it. And now that you do, you start noticing lies before they hurt you, tension before arguments explode, discomfort before someone shuts down, interest before someone admits it. You're ahead of the moment, always. But here's the quiet superpower nobody talks about: empathy. Because the more you understand behavior, the less you judge it. You see the fear behind the anger, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the loneliness behind the coldness. And instead of reacting, you respond. And people feel that. They feel understood around you. And that changes how they treat you. They listen more, trust more, open up more. Because you're no longer trying to be impressive, you're trying to be perceptive. And that's rare. So rare that people don't know why they like talking to you. They just do. Is this you, or just me? And now you notice something funny. You don't feel mentally tired after social interactions anymore. Because you're not guessing, you're reading. You're not overthinking, you're observing. You're not reacting emotionally, you're responding intelligently. And that mental clarity? That's control. But here's the final realization that hits the hardest. This skill isn't about reading others. It's about finally feeling safe around people. Because unpredictability creates anxiety, and understanding removes it. You don't fear what you understand. You don't overthink what you can predict. You don't feel overwhelmed when you can see the patterns. You just navigate. Calmly. Confidently. Quietly. And life feels easier. Conversations feel lighter. Relationships feel clearer. Drama feels avoidable. Because you see it forming before it happens, and you choose differently. That's the real power of reading people like a book. Not manipulation, not mind games. Clarity. Peace. Control.
You stop walking into rooms wondering how you'll be perceived, and start walking in knowing exactly how others feel. That's a different kind of confidence. A quiet one. A steady one. A real one. And here's the emotional takeaway you didn't expect. You were never socially awkward. You were socially untrained. And now, you're trained. If this hit home, don't just scroll. Subscribe and start choosing a lighter way to live.